Welcome to the Inside Scoop Live podcast, where indie authors get personal about their books, their writing, and their passions. I'm your host, Sherry Hoyt. Join me for some lively conversations with debut indie authors and seasoned veterans alike. It's a great place to find your next amazing read or even get inspired. So sit back and enjoy the show and let me know what you think. Hey everyone, welcome back to Inside Scoop Live. Today I'm talking with author L.A. Thompson about her debut novel, Isle of Dragons. And if you like dragons and fantasy and witchcraft and royals, you are going to love this story. And I want to thank L.A. ahead of time because she's in Australia and had to get up really early to do this interview. So thank you in advance, L.A. Before we get started, here's the inside scoop on L.A. Thompson. Author L.A. Thompson knew she wanted to be a writer at a young age. She longed to create worlds and characters that would draw people in and transport them to another time and place, which she achieves in her novel Isle of Dragons. L.A. loves fantasy and witchcraft, and by combining those elements in her stories with different historical periods, she creates a world that's in an industrial era caught between technology and magic, exploring the unique interplay. To learn more about L.A. and her books, visit her website at la-thompson.com. Well, hi, L.A. Welcome to Inside Scoop Live.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
I've been looking forward to talking with you about your novel, Isle of Dragons. Can you tell us a little bit about the story?
Yeah, Isle of Dragons is about a girl called Jade who loses everything. She loses her last remaining family, her position as a noble, and everything she ever knew, basically. And the story is about her going out and trying to regain that because she believes her father has been banished to the Isle of Dragons, and she's determined to get there at any cost. Along the way, she meets this colorful cast of characters who help her to reach her goal.
Okay. So what inspired you to write this story?
I think, I just wanted to create a story about a unique world that would take people to somewhere new, that would transport people. And that idea just kind of fascinated me, of building this fantastical world of creatures and magic and machines and all, but while also having a basis in really our own human experiences, having something that would ground it for us. And I felt like just the story of this girl struggling with her identity and trying to find her own place, and her friends struggle with trying to find their place in the world, and just the corruption they come across and the different people they come across all has something that is grounded in a sense of reality. So just growing up, just stories that had the fantastical element, like, say, Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, but something in it, some characters in it that could ground it for the audience, was always something that really interested me and I wanted to explore.
Yeah. So it sounds like coming of age in a fantastical world, but with something that readers can relate to. Probably some of the experiences your characters go through on some level.
Yeah, I love the idea of transporting readers to somewhere else and just having something that you can escape, in that sense of escapism, while also having it grounded in reality and people being able to relate to that character. That relatability is always essential to any story, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. So when did you start writing, and what got you into the fantasy genre?
Oh, yeah, I started writing years ago. Like the first idea for this story happened like 6 or 7 years ago, and it's like gradually built up over time. Yeah, and I even did like courses at university and stuff, and because I love fantasy and just fantastical science fiction type of things since I was a kid, and I'd go to the movies and watch like Star Wars or read about places that authors such as Ursula K. Le Guin and I mentioned Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
Those kind of things they just drew me, and I just love them. So that's really what drew me to writing those just amazing worlds that I think, I wanted to create something like that. I think that really just inspired me.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, to me anyway, you picked probably one of the most difficult genres to write in for your first book.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, it did take a lot of time to just create that world and to really, get all of the elements together for that. And yeah, it was hard. And I think in a way writing about the existing world is easier in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what can you tell us about Jade, your lead character?
Well, Jade is a noble. She's the daughter of a baron, and she comes from this world of like court life that's oppressive and stifling, and she doesn't know much about herself, like such as her mom's heritage, because she died when Jade was still at quite a young age. And I think the story of Isle of Dragons is kind of about her travels out in the world and meeting people and discovering more about herself and about kind of where she fits into the wider world, and her making decisions about who she wants to be rather than the feeling of who she's expected to be.
She sounds like an interesting character. How did you go about developing her? And, well, actually, how do you go about developing all of your characters?
I start from a place of just what they want, what motivates them, and then just kind of going from there. And, I try to make that point of motivation both their greatest strength and their greatest weakness, because Jade, she wants to find her father. She wants to go and find him, and in a sense, I think she also wants things to go back to the way they were. Mm. So her drive to find her father, to find her family, it makes her very determined. It makes her very brave and strong character, but it also makes her kind of want things to go back to the way they were. It makes her against any kind of change and opening herself up to other people, at least at first. And then later on, she does kind of let down her guard and realize she can trust other people, and that her desire for things to go back to the way they were wasn't necessarily good for her. It's something she has to realize throughout the book, and that shutting people out isn't good for her. And so it's that basic motivation for her to find her dad. It brings up a lot of other things for her, and it brings up a lot of other avenues for her to develop as a character as the story goes on.
So she kind of grows up over the course of the story.
Yeah, she does. She only kind of had her world that she knew, and throughout the story she discovers this much bigger world, and she's able to change and grow throughout the story because of her interactions with this bigger world and the characters she meets along the way.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of just wanting to stay safe in your own little environment, because that's where we feel the most secure. It takes a lot of, courage to grow and expand yourself. So, but that's all part of the coming of age, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, Jade's friends, they are motivated to help people or protect something that's very dear to them, but, they also have to recognize that what they're leaving behind has value, or they have value in their own way, and they don't have to go about doing things a certain way in order to have that value. So basically, as I said, I kind of develop characters from their basic motivation and what kind of strengths and weaknesses does that motivation bring out in that character that they have to overcome or expand throughout the course of the story.
Mm-hmm. Now, you also put a different spin on the overall fantasy genre. At least our reviewer noted that she liked the elements of innovation you added to the story. So why did you put that kind of spin on the standard fantasy elements?
Well, it didn't actually start off that way. At the beginning, it was kind of just that standard kind of medieval fantasy story where Jade was escaping on a horse, and then there weren't these fantastical, like, steampunk elements to it. But later on, I added that because there was something about it that felt too dry. It felt too standard. I felt as though there needed to be more in it, and this would add something to the world and add some interesting flavor to it. And I just aesthetically love the idea of these different creatures, just on basic level. It was just interesting for me. And yeah, then I expanded on that with the idea of that the country ranch that Jade lives in, they're going through an industrial revolution. And then it comes from the world of, well, how does that inform how they interact with other nations with their industrial revolution? How does that inform the structure of their economy, and how they go about obtaining these machines and putting them together? And then it grew and grew from there, and because it implied all these other questions about, how this world is constructed.
Yeah, I love that spin on it, though. It kind of takes it to a different level, an unexpected level. Yeah, nice.
And yeah, and it was kind of drawing on that love of science fiction and Star Wars. So that was another element of it for me. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like there was a lot of research involved. Is that true, or did most of the story come from your imagination?
I mean, well, I feel like stories have to come from a combination of imagination and research, or they do for me anyway. And so, I would come up with an idea, and then I would build on it through looking at different mythologies, history, and so on. There was a lot of kind of looking at the industrial era and the Renaissance era, the Crusades, and a history of witchcraft, and then kind of just mashing that together into something that I hoped would make sense and would have a world that had a history behind it. And so that was something that was really fun to do, and something that I hope would come together and get out the different story elements, so different elements of mythology that came together, along with looking at different historical periods.
Yeah, it sounds like you researched a bunch of, well, to me anyway, very interesting eras and topics, and like witchcraft. The research part is just really an interesting process to me. I like to hear how different authors do it. So was there anything that you were surprised to learn while you were researching and creating your book?
Yeah, like the history of witchcraft was quite interesting to me, and how kind of witches became kind of the scapegoat for all of the things going on. And, during the Renaissance era, there was a book written about witches and about how they cover the cause of all, like, the plague and pestilence and everything happening, and not people just not washing and
Yeah.
having basic hygiene. It was all kind of the of witches, and they were cursing people, and so that was really interesting, and learning about some more, I guess, obscure creatures in mythology. And I know that there was like a creature in Alpine mythology, which was half cat and half snake or serpent,
Oh, wow.
and that from people who would travel up mountains. They created this creature, and which would be I imagine quite frightening to
Yeah.
encounter something like that, and it does end up popping up in the story.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I don't think I'd like to come across that creature for sure. I'm interested in the way you write. Did you let Jade dictate her story, or did you map her course out first?
Well, I mapped it out to an extent, but I think that she ended up taking over. I think, for me anyway, writing has to be a mix between planning and something that happens organically. That's something that kind of surprises you when you realize that the story needs to go in this direction to feel like there's been a fulfilling arc, like something is right for the story.
Yeah.
I don't believe in planning too rigidly, because sometimes it means that you're not doing the story or the characters justice. Because I realized later on that some of the characters needed to go in this direction, and that sometimes things needed to change along the way. So, for me, I think creating a story is a blend of exploration and planning. I don't want to err too far on either side of that.
Yeah. It's nice to have an outline, but you don't want to, as you said, be so rigid, because that could stifle the character, and that might haunt you later on down the road. So I have to ask you, there are many stories in print about dragons. So how does your book, Isle of Dragons, stand out?
I feel as though this isn't a story about dragons, even though it's called Isle of Dragons. It's about people discovering who they are, and I feel just all the fantastical elements. I hope that there's something that does draw people in, including the dragon elements to the story, but I hope they stay for the characters, for the conflicts, and for how they play out. So I hope the fantastical elements are something that are enjoyable for people, as they were for me in other stories that I've read and that have informed this one. But I hope they stay for really the character elements and for the conflict. I think that is what's at the heart of it for me.
Okay. And have you had any feedback to that effect from readers?
I have, yeah. I mean, I think the feedback has been, largely positive, and I've been very encouraged by it. But, it's been great to see that people have liked the main character. They've said that the main heroine, Jade, is someone that they find relatable and endearing, which I'm very happy about. That if you can connect to the main character, I feel that that's something very important. And yeah, just having people say that they've enjoyed that, and they've enjoyed just the various kind of elements of it and how they were put together, and that's something that I put a lot of time and effort into, and I am glad that was something that they were able to get something from. But mostly, yeah, I am glad that people were happy with the characters, and because I think that's what is most central to a story to me, is the characters and how they they change and grow and interact with one another. And if people can connect with them, I feel as though I've done my job well.
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to love character-driven stories. Of course, there has to be a plot, but I prefer the characters to kind of drive the plot. So, yeah, it sounds great. Now, this is your debut novel, and is it part of a series or a standalone book?
This is part of a series. This is the first in a trilogy of books.
Oh, okay. Thinking about your debut writing journey, what do you love most about the process of being a writer?
I guess it's really creating those characters, getting the ideas out, and and seeing it all come together. I think that's just incredibly satisfying for me to see all of those ideas, all the back and forth, and just all the questioning yourself, all of that, finally come together into a book. That process, it's immensely satisfying to see that all come together.
Yeah, I'll bet. See all your hard work paying off. So, what do you like to do when you aren't writing?
Oh, well, I enjoy, walking my dog and Tai Chi and trying to get outside and be physical, which wasn't something that was really easy to do last year.
Right, right. Now, I read that you also help out at a local history museum as a researcher. What do you do there?
Yeah, it just is a local museum. They are constantly doing research on, say, local families and the local history, and I help put those things together, and I work with families, or I'll work with the head researcher on putting together different papers and things about the historical figures there, and I love doing that. I find that really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to learn more about your local area too. We go on vacation and we learn about other places, but how many of us spend the time in our hometown learning more about that? So, yeah, that must be fun.
It is, yeah.
So what's next for you?
Yeah, I'm working on a few different things, but mostly I'm working on the sequel to Isle of Dragons, because it's going to be the first in a trilogy of books, and currently getting the second one done, and I hope people are going to be really interested in where that one goes, because it's going to delve deeper into the world, delve deeper into how magic works and about the characters and their relationships. In particular, we'll get to see more of one of the central villains of the first one, Kaylin, and her kind of relationship with Jade and what drives her. And we'll kind of see her maybe questioning the direction things are going in. So, readers are going to see more of her and her relationships and what is going to be driving her forward. So I hope readers will be interested in that.
Okay, yeah, that sounds exciting. And when do you expect that to be out?
The end of the year, I'd say. October, November, yeah.
Okay, nice. So you've put this one together pretty quickly then?
Yes, this one is coming together much quicker than the first. But, they always say the first one takes the most time to write, but so this one has been coming together quite quickly.
Oh, good. Well, you've got the experience of writing your first book behind you and all that goes with that, so now it's just focus on the writing time, so I imagine it is a lot easier. So, do you have any advice for aspiring authors based on your own journey?
I would say that persistence really is the key to anything in life. But writing, I would say you just need to have persistence. Obviously, you need to have that talent and creativity, but to succeed, I think more than anything, you need persistence. When you're feeling as though your story isn't going well, or you feel as though it's a waste of time, that, this isn't going to work out, I think the best thing to do is to just move through it or find another way to tackle the problem, and that you'll get there. It's not going to be easy, but I think just kind of moving through that and relying on your passion for what you're doing is going to be a major factor in moving you forward. So I think that to remember why you love doing what you're doing and keep going is just a major piece of advice I would have.
Yeah, that's great advice. And maybe do a little Tai Chi if you get stuck, huh? Well, LA, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really been a pleasure getting to know more about you and your work.
Thank you. It's been great to talk to you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining me today for my interview with L.A. Thompson, author of Isle of Dragons. For more information on L.A. and her work, visit her website at la-thompson.com. And be sure to check out our other interviews on InsideScoopLive.com.